started. I know that some other folks will be coming in. We've had a great response. So hello, everybody. My name is Mary Saul, Senior Program Manager, and I manage our Waste Prevention Grants Program, and super pleased to be able to share all about our grants program and the applications and the process, and to help make this as smooth as possible for those that are interested in applying for funding. Just to let folks know, we just like a couple housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar for those who couldn't attend. And because we are recording it, and due to the large amount of entities that have registered for today, we've disabled cameras and muted attendees to keep the webinar as streamlined and as easy to follow and hear as possible. So we are using our question and answer webinar today. And so please, that's the bottom, the Q&A button on the bottom. Please put your questions in there. Put them in throughout the presentation, and at the end, we will have time to answer all the questions and provide answers to those questions at the end of the webinar. Save the chat if you're having any technical difficulties, but we'll be monitoring the question and answer button throughout the webinar. Looks like our poll shows that majority attendees today are nonprofits and businesses, with kind of a couple of folks from municipalities and industry and so forth. So with that, let's next slide. So as I mentioned, my name is Mary Saul, and I'd like to introduce briefly our grants team, who will be providing a whole bunch of information and overview on our grants program. Justin Laird, Casey Bartholomew, Michelle Fay, Janine Sidran, Ben Duggan, Michelle Fay, oh, I already said that, Chris Hunter, and Adrian Ramirez. So thank you all. They've all been instrumental in putting together this webinar and the grants program. This is the first time that we have done this webinar, and we put it together so applicants could have a good understanding of the grant process, what we're looking for in regards to project types and applications, as well as provide opportunity for applicants to ask questions. This slide here, the bullet points just give attendees an idea of what we'll be presenting today. I'm not going to go through each bullet point, but you'll get an idea of an overview, and hopefully everything will be relevant for your questions if we have them for later. Next slide. So this year we have $700,000 in funding to distribute to businesses, nonprofits, and institutions that have projects and services that focus on reuse and repair, redistribution of goods, including foods that are based in Alameda County. Some goals of our programs for this fiscal year are to jumpstart an idea, advance concepts, and improve our reuse, repair, and redistribution infrastructure in Alameda County. Funding is available for these upstream projects only. Recycling and composting-based projects are not eligible, and keep in mind the application deadline is February 25th. At 5 p.m. on the dot, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So here, this slide shows the estimated breakdown of how the $700,000 is to be distributed amongst the 5 focus areas. And just in a minute, you're going to hear more details in each focus area, but I wanted to provide a summary of the estimated available funds that we have. And note the little asterisk at the 700,000. That's just to show that these are estimated funding budget allowances for each focus area, and we've based it on our previous year funding disbursements. However, we do have the authority to move funds from one project focus area to another based on demand and quality of proposed projects within a specific focus area. Next slide. So I'm going to be presenting our first focus area, which is our reuse and repair. There's estimated $200,000 available for this focus area. And this goal of this focus is to minimize the need of disposal or recycling and foster reduction to stimulate economic activity in the reuse and recovery sectors. So we're looking for projects that create new reuse and repair infrastructure, as well as expand or maintain existing ones. The projects we're looking for support reuse, repair, recovery, and redistribution, not food waste related. You'll hear about that in a minute on our food waste recovery projects. And again, recycling and composting based projects are not eligible. The maximum grant award is $20,000, and we have about $200,000 to give. We don't always give the maximum award, but that is the level that we're looking for. An example of a recent grant recipient, you can see here this young gentleman who is repairing a computer. Civicor is an organization we gave funding to about 2 years ago that they could place 2 interns at Tech Exchange, which is another nonprofit that collects, redistributes, and refurbishes computers to those school districts and schools that are in need. So it's a really nice partnership. Tech Exchange receives interns to help them with their product distribution, and Civicor interns learn job training skills in the reuse and repair industry. Some other examples of previous grants are these microscopes that are collected by BioLink, collects all types of research and scientific equipment that may have been destined for the landfill, and then redistributes them to schools with science programs in need. And there's another picture here of a piece of furniture that needed a facelift that has been created to be able to be sold at a Hero Furniture. And those sales support their nonprofit African People's Education and Defense Fund. Just some examples, and we'll give some more examples also throughout the presentation. So that's the reuse and repair focus area, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Justin Lehrer, to talk about reusable foodware.
Thanks, Mary, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So reusable foodware is our newest focus area this year for our grants, and simply put, these grants provide funding for projects that replace single-use disposable foodware with reusable systems. Single-use foodware, as many of you probably already know, they're often made from plastic or compostable plastic or fiber. They're very prevalent in our lives, and they result in significant impacts to human health and the environment. So our goal is to invest in reusable foodware as the solution. There's a ton of innovation happening in this space right now, and we want to develop local infrastructure and overall increase the capacity for reusables in Alameda County so that these services are more accessible and convenient to businesses and consumers. We see this as a critical step to building momentum in the space. So the projects we want to fund must support replacing single-use or disposable foodware generated in Alameda County with reusable foodware solutions. For example, implementation of reusable foodware for dine-in or for takeout at businesses, restaurants, or institutional settings. Another example, reusable foodware solutions at public events or large gatherings or venues. And then another could be expanding dishwashing or foodware rental services. So reusables for meal delivery apps, reusables for other services like that. One example is pictured here from last fiscal year. In this project, our grantee Sparkle Reusables is working with the Meals on Wheels Spectrum Community Services program to use reusable containers for their hot meal program. This effort prevented over 22,000 single-use items in just 2 months of operation, and it's still ongoing. So great impact there. These grants are available to businesses, nonprofits, and institutions, and the projects need to be located in or serve the residents or businesses of Alameda County. Before I wrap up, I just want to call attention to a few important things. We're looking for projects that scale. So smaller projects, such as a single restaurant funding a smaller purchase, may be better suited for support from our technical assistance team before seeking grant funding. So if this is your scenario, reach out to us, share your concept, and we can provide some initial feedback. And we may have some other options that may be more streamlined for purchasing reusables for smaller projects. I also want to call attention to our emphasis on partnerships. Pilot projects are preferably going to involve several partners. So for example, a city could partner with their special events vendor and a reusable cup rental service to propose a project implementing reusables at their events and venues. Or a downtown business association could partner with a cluster of restaurants in a neighborhood and a mobile dishwashing service to bring dishwashing to those restaurants that don't have it. If you're seeking partners in this space for your proposal, we have published a list of organizations that we identified through an RFQ process a couple of months ago, last November. So please consider reaching out to entities on this list. It's available on our website, and there's a link to it on our grants webpage. In terms of funding, we understand that setting up new infrastructure like this requires significant investment. So we expect to fund projects under $50,000. We can exceed that amount if appropriate, but projects approaching that funding level would be the exception rather than the norm. I would really need to demonstrate the potential for an outsized impact. So I just want to provide some context around that. And that's it. Thank you for your interest in this category. I'm unfortunately have to leave this call early, but Ben Duggan on our team is available to answer questions at the end. And next, we're going to hear from our colleague Casey Bartholomew about the food waste prevention and recovery grants.
Thanks, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. Our food waste prevention and recovery grant focus area provides funding for projects that prevent food from going to waste or recover and redistribute edible surplus food to feed people through food donation. We have doubled funding for our food focused grant areas to strengthen food waste prevention activities and food donation infrastructure in Alameda County to support the implementation of a new California state law, SB 1383. This law aims to keep food and other compostable materials out of landfill. Under this new law, some of our large food businesses in the county, such as grocery stores, wholesale food distributors, health facilities, events, and venues are now required to donate their surplus edible food to food recovery organizations and services. So our food waste prevention and recovery grants are available to both nonprofits and businesses with up to $20,000 available per application. And you can see the photo on the right shows one of our current grantees, the Alameda County Sheriff's Activities League, also known as DSAL, who was awarded funding to support DSAL's social enterprise Dig Deep Farms and their food hub distribution facility to aggregate, sort, process, and package recovered food for distribution to food insecure residents through their food pharmacies and distribution events. Next slide, please. So next up are our surplus food donation equipment and reusable transport packaging equipment grants. And I just wanted to note that the equipment grant applications have been streamlined this grant cycle to reduce some of the submittal requirements and ultimately make the application process much more accessible, given that the funding priority for these two grant focus areas is solely for equipment. Funding is not available in these two focus areas for other expenses such as staff costs and programmatic activities. So our surplus food donation equipment grants provide funding to purchase equipment that supports the recovery or donation of surplus edible food that would otherwise go to compost or landfill. This grant funding is intended to build the capacity of our nonprofit food recovery organizations and services in the county to increase the safe recovery and distribution of edible surplus food, again, generated by those large grocery stores, supermarkets, wholesale food vendors, and other food businesses in Alameda County. In this grant focus area, we have up to $10,000 per application available for nonprofit organizations like food pantries, food banks, community or faith-based organizations, and food recovery services to ultimately purchase needed equipment. And you can see some examples of equipment that some of our grantees have purchased with this funding, such as chest freezers or refrigerators, Cambro hot and cold boxes to transport and serve food, pallet jacks, and other equipment related to facilitating food recovery and distribution. So I am going to turn it over to Michelle Fay, who will share more about our reusable transport packaging grants.
Great, thanks, Casey. Our next grant focus area is reusable transport packaging. This program helps both businesses and nonprofits move away from the recurring waste and costs of single-use transport packaging that's used in manufacturing, transportation, and distribution. Grants help cover that upfront cost to purchase reusable alternatives to things like cardboard boxes and plastic pallet wrap. Reusable totes or crates for produce, for example, are a common item we fund to replace single-use waxed cardboard boxes. Reusable pallet wraps are an alternative to film plastic wrap and are designed to be used for many years. Not only do they reduce waste, they can have an ergonomic benefit as well, as they're often easier for employees to use compared to having to wrap a pallet several times with a roll of plastic. Durable pallets are another type of reusable transport packaging. This focus area has a maximum grant amount of $10,000, and we're pleased to offer virtual or on-site technical assistance to help work through the details of your project all the way through an implementation stage. If your organization purchases single-use transport packaging and you think you may have an opportunity to switch to reusables, next slide, thank you. A good resource to learn more is our usereusables.org website. There you'll get to see a more complete list of the types of reusables, as well as access our success stories. And those can be filtered by both the type or industry of projects. You'll also find a couple short videos on the homepage, and those give a nice overview of how reusables can be a great long-term benefit to your organization. So that's it on this grant focus area, and now I'll turn it back to Mary for more on the overall grants program.
Thanks, Michelle. So the next couple of slides, and I want everyone to start thinking about potential ideas after they've heard the focus areas, answer some questions, put them in the Q&A. I think it was a nice overview of the different types of projects and potential funding opportunities for entities. So these next couple of slides will cover some of the basics relating to the application process and procedures. Everything that I'm going to share in the next couple of slides is found on our website. And at the end, I'll do a quick run through of where you can find them on the website. But just to keep it clean and stop jumping back and forth from PowerPoint to the website, I'm just going to kind of go over some of the details now, and then we can show you on the website where they live. So regarding eligibility, you must be based in Alameda County or have a project that diverts materials that's generated in Alameda County. So for example, if you're based in Contra Costa, but you're collecting computers for repair and redistribution in Alameda County, and you're pulling those computers from Alameda County, you would be considered eligible. There are nuances here, so please reach out to your grant manager within your focus area that you think your project might fall in to ensure that you're eligible before you start an application. Also, if you have an open grant with Stop Waste, you please touch base with your grant manager prior to applying or starting an application for additional funding. And also, if you are planning on using a fiscal sponsor, we have very particular requirements and when we allow a fiscal sponsor to be utilized. So please touch base with Stop Waste staff before even starting the application if you're planning on using a fiscal sponsor. Schools, both private and public, are not eligible, but they can be part of a partnership. For example, something similar to what Justin shared. If a reusable foodware company, they could apply for funds to implement a change for a school or a school district to move from single-use disposable foodware to reusable foodware. So there are ways to partner, but a school could not apply on behalf of themselves to receive funding. And the same thing with the municipalities. They're not eligible to receive direct funding, but we certainly would encourage partnerships within cities and the county as well. Next slide. Thank you. So here's some basic information on what is involved with submitting a grant application. And as I mentioned at the end of the presentation, I'll open up the website and show you the actual applications and so forth. But just wanted folks to get an idea of where to find everything and what information we will require in advance. All the program grant details are in this grant information packet. You can see I put a little snippet from our website. It's on the top of all the opportunities. So please take a look at that. Everything you need to know about the grant program is there in the information packet. And Janine, if you could put the link to this document in the chat, folks can take a look right now if they're interested. Each grant focus area has a unique set of requirements, but in general, the focus areas with the larger grant awards, the reusable foodware, the reuse and repair, and the food recovery grants have a similar set of requirements, whereas the equipment grants that provide funding for equipment have a much more streamlined application and contracting process with fewer requirements, as Casey mentioned. A note about insurance. So our agency requires most of our grant recipients, except for equipment grants, to have insurance. So if you're applying for a grant that requires insurance, you will need to submit proof of insurance. If you don't currently carry insurance, you'll need to provide an estimate of your insurance coverage. And we ask for this so you know how much it would cost. And we know that you're aware that you'll need to have insurance should you be awarded funding. And a note that insurance costs can be part of your budget project. It can be a line item. So something to think about in regards to insurance. Next slide. So another reference to the importance of reading through the information packet, as it contains the criteria that staff uses to evaluate applications. And here are just the bullet points for the 6 areas that staff uses to evaluate an application. All the details for those 6 bullet points are in the packet of information, and I encourage everyone to read it. It gives you an idea of what staff considers a strong application and what we look at when we review the applications using this set of criteria. And I know Janine's put that link into the chat. So take a look at that now or a later time. Priority is given to applicants with strong proposals and also those who have not received funding in the past. And then stop waste staff reviews those applications using a set of criteria. We also conduct site tours. We might reach out for clarifying information, do a Zoom call. We really like to know as much as possible about the applicant as well as the proposal before making our recommendations for funding. Next slide. Very briefly, this is our schedule. The grants are due on the 25th at 5 p.m. I can't stress enough to start earlier. Every year we have many disappointed applicants who didn't start early enough or were in the process of uploading their application at 5 and they were declined. So please reach out to us early if you're having any issues or need guidance, and don't wait till the last minute. Next slide. So here are some application tips. One is you can only apply to one focus area. So you can only submit one grant application. Please don't submit multiples. Actually, the system won't let you, but that would disqualify you from the start. So talk with staff if you're unsure where your project fits. Read the overview document. I'm not going to stress that enough. You really need to look through everything that I'm going to show you in a minute about the submittal portal requirements. Become familiar with what you need to do, and that will make sure that your application is strong. As Justin mentioned, partnerships are an integral part for all of our grant programs. And I also encourage you to review some previously funded grantees, and I'll show you on the website where to find that, and submit early, like really early. And also reach out to staff. We have a new office hours Friday from 11 to 1. And you can make an appointment to talk to someone one-on-one regarding your proposed application, or if you have questions, you're not sure if you're eligible, those things. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think, contact staff, as I mentioned, if you have an open grant, if you want to use a fiscal sponsor, like to discuss projects. I'm going to show you in a second here all of our staff members' information and contacts. It's important to reach out. We really like to see applications that we've talked to the folks before we received it, so we have a good idea of the proposal. Next slide. For those of you who are selected for a grant award, just to know that you'll need to enter into a funding agreement, and sometimes it can take up to 6 weeks to execute that agreement. You cannot spend any funds toward that project until there's an agreement in place. With the exception of equipment grants, the deliverables are tied to payments. So if you're awarded a $15,000 grant, you just don't receive a $15,000 check. You need to, part of the scope of services is to show how you will do certain activities in order to receive funding. You'll need to invoice for your funds and your equipment, and then also provide us with some interim and final reports. And then the next slide, and we're almost in the home stretch. So every year we have way more requests for funding than we have funding available. So I wanted to make Attendees are aware of 2 other grant funding opportunities that are around the 4 Rs. The Altamont Education Advisory Board, they have grants available for Alameda County citizens and organizations, as well as the city of San Ramon, up to $50,000, or they have some mega grants. The link is on the bottom, and Janine can put that in the chat for you to all take a look at. Their deadline's March 4th. And then for any entities that are working in San Mateo, the Office of Sustainability, they also have a grant program around the 4 Rs. They happen to have a webinar similar to ours, I think the first week in February, and take a look at that. And if Janine could put that link in the chat as well, folks can take a look at that as well. This is being recorded, and we'll also send a follow-up with some of these links as well. So with that, I would like to take a minute just to share my screen and go through the website. Does everyone see the website? Michelle, give me a heads up because I see your face. Okay, thank you. So here is our grants landing page, and everything that I've shared about is on this grant landing page and all the links. So I'm trying not to make everyone dizzy. I just wanted to show folks where everything lived. And if Janine could put this link in the chat, it's stopwaste.org/grants. If you wanted to follow along, you can keep going through the different areas of the web page. But here's some basic information about how to apply for the grant funding. There's that grant program information packet. We talked about the timeline. Here is where you can reach out to staff and make a one-on-one appointment. And then slowly the different focus areas and the applications all live here below. But a little trick that I'd like to share is here up on the right-hand side is all shortcuts to what I just showed you. And so the grant information packet is right on top for everyone to take a look at. Lots of important information in there. But I also wanted to point out here that we have some frequently asked questions. Our grant FAQs and the responses that we have today will add to here, but some of your questions may have already been asked and answered. So you can go through and take a look at the different types of questions and responses that we have responded to over the years. And here's another great section of it's our previously funded grants. So for about the last 3 or 4 years, we have all the different grant types that we have funded over the years. So here, if you're interested to see about the food waste reduction grants and the types of entities that we have funded, you can take a look, and there's the grantee themselves, a description of the grant activities that they were funded for, as well as their website. And so it's also a nice place to look for other folks perhaps partner with on potential projects. So those are 2 areas that I really would like attendees to take a look at to get some ideas, but just also wanted to kind of share and go through very quickly what the grant application looks like and the process to submit. You can find all the applications here on the right. So you pick your food area, your focus area. So say you're interested in the food waste prevention and recovery grants. There's some more information for those. And then here you can download the application. It's a very simple Word document. We have gone back and forth on best ways of approaches, and we've been gotten feedback that a Word document is a fairly pretty easy way for our applicants to respond. So I'm not going to go through everything, but I just wanted to give folks a feel for what an application looks like. The food waste prevention is one of the larger grants we offer, so the application has a little bit more requirements and details than, say, the equipment grant. But there's about 10 questions, and you'll see sometimes there's a word maximum and sometimes there isn't. My advice to any applicant is to just respond to the question and not worry so much about the size of the box. We tried to keep it nice and clean. So the best approach is to respond to the question as succinctly as possible. And you don't need to fill out the whole page. Sorry, I'm trying to make everyone not dizzy, so I'm going somewhat slow, but I think everyone can do this on their own. What I'm trying to get down to is the last question to show folks. So again, you don't need to fill out a whole page. Succinct answers is the best approach. and partnerships, as we mentioned before. But here, when you're done and you've completed your application, and also a budget, so you'll need to complete a budget as part of the application process and review some of our agreement requirements. Here are the directions for submitting an application and supporting documents. So the very first thing you do, there's 3 steps. We try to keep it as streamlined as possible. Is once you complete your Word doc, save it as a PDF. And then for this particular grant, here are all the other types of required supporting documents that we will need. Those will all be in a PDF. And once you pull them together, you make one single PDF. And then that part of the application process is done. And then you're going to need to submit that PDF to our portal. And this is where you would submit your application. And we've had over 100, 125 applications last year. And so we created this portal to be able to track all of this information in a database system. So if you're applying for a food waste prevention and recovery grant, all the requirements will pop up here in the submittal portal. That's why you need to give yourself some extra time. You need to put in some information about the project summary, and then there's some basic information you need to put into the submittal portal. So you need to give yourself some time. This is where some folks, they say at 4:30 or 4:45, they're going to submit their application and they run into trouble because there's some extra information they need to put in, or they're having a problem uploading their application. This is where you would upload your PDF. And we also have some technical assistance on putting your PDF in the actual application themselves. And then you sign and you submit, and your application has been complete, and you will receive an email from us saying we've received your application. So that is kind of the overall tour of our website. I see there's a bunch of questions and chats. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Annalisa, who is going to queue up some questions for our staff to respond to. And I'm going to go back to the beginning page. Okay, take it away, Annalisa.
Great, thanks, Mary. Okay, so we do have several questions in the Q&A, and we'll put our responses in them after they're answered on the Q&A box. But maybe, let's see, we can start with some of the larger general questions. We had one question from Nicole on whether these are annual grants. So if we don't apply or qualify for this 2022 term, is there generally opportunities in the next year, 2023 as well?
Yeah, so generally we do provide these grants on an annual basis. It is based on the budget, but I've been offering grants for the last 25 years, and we've offered them every year. So it's an annual process.
Great, thanks, Mary. Another kind of broader question, can you define what we mean by institutions for grant eligibility? And so another follow-up is, would a K-12 school count as an institution?
So I think institutions are generally something along the lines of a research facility, say the Lawrence Berkeley Lab. That's kind of what comes to mind when I say institution. A school district or a K-12 school on their own would not be eligible.
But potentially maybe through a partnership.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary.
And just to follow up on that, one of the reasons why we have a whole schools program. We provide a whole variety of resources. You can find that information on our website. Maybe Janine could put the landing page into the chat. But we have a whole program dedicated to supporting schools. And that's why they're not eligible for this funding resource.
Great. And then we had some questions about specifically the reusable foodware pilot grants. A question from Brian, is the $210K for reusable foodware pilot grants only available to those on the approved vendor list, or is this separate from that solicitation? I think Ben was gonna take that question.
Yeah, thanks, Annalisa. And thanks for the question, Brian. The funding is available to organizations that aren't on the approved vendor list. We're really looking for partnerships. And so we have pre-qualified some reusable foodware related services that responded to an RFQ that we issued in the fall. those businesses are on our website. And if you're looking for a partner, it's a great place to start. We can post that. I can post that link in the chat. But organizations on that list can definitely apply for a grant. So.
Great. Thanks, Ben. And then just keeping on the thread of the Reusables grant, there was also a question from Ross just about the about COVID-19 and the sanitation concerns in implementing reusable foodware. Did you want to speak to that as well?
Sure. We realize there's some concerns with COVID-19, and we worked with Alameda County public health officials who confirmed that there's no COVID-related restrictions on reusables. We developed an information sheet about this that's available on our website, and we can post that link into the chat as well.
Great, thanks, Ben. Another question for you from Nicole is, Justin spoke about grants to replace single use, and he mentioned that grants would best fund projects at scale, but can we give an example of a smaller project that may not fit this grant requirement, understanding that each grant is for a project about 50K, is that correct?
50K is kind of the upper range that we're expecting to fund for this one. We're looking for projects from 5 to 50K. And a good example of a project that doesn't fit perfectly into our grant opportunity would be a single restaurant looking to make a relatively small purchase of some reusable foodware. They'd be better supported by our technical assistance team. And that assistance includes some incentive payments. So, but please reach out to us with your project idea and we can direct you to our technical assistance team.
Thanks, Ben. Moving on to some questions that came up around food waste prevention and recovery. A question for Casey from Emily. Can the same organization apply for surplus food donation equipment and for the recovery and distribution of edible food?
Great question, Emily. We actually, for all the focus areas, we ask applicants to only apply for one, submit one application for one focus area. So that would be either picking the food waste prevention and recovery grants or the surplus food donation equipment grant to apply for.
Thanks, Casey. Another question on the food waste grants from Romney, who says, it seems like the grants are mostly for larger organizations, but as a restaurant who is trying to see how they can fit into a food waste prevention program, potentially by taking all excess food, processing it, cooking, preparing meals, and redistributing it to people in need. But they're wondering if this is still a good fit within these grants.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I saw that pop up from a couple restaurants. We don't have a size threshold necessarily for businesses in our food waste prevention and recovery grant focus area. So I would say that we are always looking for innovative ideas and new concepts that could potentially be good case studies for other businesses or restaurants. If that's something that you think you have as a concept, I'd love to talk about it more, and I encourage you to reach out to talk through what that concept might look like. We also do, as Ben mentioned, offer technical assistance for businesses, including restaurants, around food waste prevention and recovery. So that's another free option as well.
Thanks, Casey. We have a couple more questions that came in on food recovery. A question from Shelby. Can the food waste prevention and recovery grant be used to fund aspects of a food pantry?
Are we able to get Shelby live to find out what those aspects are? I mean, generally, if you're referring to equipment needs such as shelving, storage equipment, containers, carts, the equipment grant would be a good fit for that. I see here also another question around delivery trucks, rolling shelves. Those are all eligible expenses under the surplus food donation equipment grants. So basically, you know, anything that is not a disposable material or supply to facilitate the recovery or distribution of edible surplus food.
Thanks, Casey. Let's see, we have a question more on the application process. A question from Sharon: can the application be saved and then returned to complete?
Yeah, so that's why it's in a Word document. You can download that Word document and save it on your computer and go back to it as many times as you need. And then once you've completed your Word document and you've turned it into a PDF and you put it together with the other PDFs and submitted it, that's then and only then that you have not access to it. So the actual Word application you download and work on it at your own pace.
Another general question is, are any of the grant focus areas more competitive or applied to than others?
Well, that changes every year. So the reusable foodware is a new focus area, so it's hard to share. In the past, the reuse and repair grants have seen more applicants than others, but that seems to be changing year by year. So it's hard for me to answer that, but I think the ones for $20,000, the foodware, the reuse and repair, and the food waste recovery probably received the most applications.
Mary, I think this question is for Michelle, but I'm not sure. I'll read it and see. A question from Audrey: are reusable transport container applicants also prioritized if a partner is involved?
Sure, I can take that. So I don't think we would necessarily prioritize partnerships for reusable transport packaging. More what we're looking at is the ability to, well, let me back up. If you had a partner that had the opportunity to then share reusables among other organizations or businesses, then that would be something that we would prioritize. Basically, the ability to scale a project up is something we would be interested in exploring. I'm not sure if that's a good answer, but hopefully that helps.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. More of a general question. I think Mary could take this one from Sergio. Do you consider technological projects or solutions?
I guess it depends on the technological project or solution, but if it has to do with upstream activities, then for sure. So I guess I would need to know a little bit more, and I would encourage Sergio to reach out to me or one of the staff members for some details or put some more information in. If you're talking about perhaps an app, like creating an app that allows someone to then pick up and donate food, if that's a type of technological application, then that would be something we could consider, yeah.
Great, thank you. And a question from Lynn about what the grant funds will cover. So can our grants cover a portion of payroll?
So the grant, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. The grant funding is allowable, well, not the equipment grant. So I don't believe, I know that, so for the larger funding grants, only up to 50% of a staff person can be covered by the grant funding award. And we do that because we found that sometimes if we funded a full-time position and then the next year they didn't receive grant funding, that position went away. So we cover 50% of a staff person's time.
Great. Another question about how the grants are evaluated. So from Carrie: how important or impactful is youth job training opportunities within these focuses?
Well, I'll start and then maybe some other folks can jump in. If there's a training opportunity where you are able to provide training in some type of the upstream activities, that is something that we're definitely interested in and may prioritize if you're able to create some type of workforce program around these industries. I don't know if any other focus area wants to jump in on that. Casey or Ben. it might not be applicable as much.
I mean, we certainly have seen aspects of workforce development and training in proposals that we received. It's not explicitly called out as a focus or an area of interest, but always a potential bonus if that's included.
Okay, let's see. I think we've kind of almost reached the end of questions. I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't miss any. There was a question about, are we able to share the rejected applications?
Huh. So generally we put together a list of all the applicants that have received funding. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could. I mean, generally we could put a list. I'm not sure what the intent for receiving the rejected list, but I'd have to double check with legal. I don't see why we couldn't. I guess I would wonder why someone would want that list, but generally we have a list of everyone that's applied for funding and who receives and who doesn't.
Yeah, and generally, I mean, this person also commented if they could see if their idea is not a good one, but generally, I mean, our staff is available to consult with anyone who's interested in running a project idea by us. So
And
that's a great way.
brings up a good point also is if we do as staff, if someone does not receive funding, we are amenable to having a conversation with an applicant to find if they would like to find out how they could make their application stronger the next fiscal year or the reasons why we haven't funded. We do that as well.
There was a question in the chat a while back from Joswell. I'll put this question to Ben. They asked, my restaurant uses reusable containers and foodwares for dine-in and takeout. Am I eligible?
Yeah, I would really encourage you to reach out to me and let me know your specific situation. Typically, we're really looking for partnerships and projects that are going to involve multiple businesses or impact a large number of people. But I definitely want to encourage any restaurants, if you are thinking of doing reusables, to get in touch with our team, and we can figure out how to fit, come up with some options. Whether it's our technical assistance team or something like that.
Thanks, Ben. I think that was all of the questions that came in. So unless there are more folks who are typing questions in the chat or Q&A right now.
Well, in the interim, I just really want to thank everyone who attended. I think we at one point had 110 attendees for the webinar. So that's a good start for our first time. And I hope that folks found it valuable and informative. Certainly open to feedback if you think you could have some suggestions on how to improve it, but really encourage everyone to reach out to us as staff so that we can get to know you and get to know your project. And looking forward to seeing some great applications. And you'll receive an email, I believe, from Chris Hunter or myself with a copy of this webinar being recorded, and then we'll also send some links